I'm going to tell you this story exactly as it's being whispered online, and where the whispers stop cold. The headline flying around says Ghislaine Maxwell just dropped disturbing evidence that left Meghan Markle speechless. It sounds final and dramatic, the kind of phrasing that melts timelines. But the moment you start hunting for proof, documents, sworn statements, filings, you hit a wall. What you actually find are social posts recycling the claim and pointing to screenshots rather than records, the digital equivalent of a rumor passed from hand to hand without anyone showing the original source. That's important because in 2025, there's plenty we can read for ourselves, and this isn't in it. The bombshell lives almost entirely in the echo chamber, while the paper trail points somewhere else, or nowhere at all. And when a claim this big refuses to attach itself to a publicly verifiable document, that's your first signal that silence might be evidence of absence, not a cover-up. That rumor hangs on one idea, a mysterious CV tied to Meghan from before the royal headlines, suggestive enough to light a fuse and vague enough to dodge specifics. People latch onto CV because it feels like paperwork, and paperwork feels like proof. Yet if such a document existed and carried real weight, credible outlets would rush it, attorneys would cite it, and filings would reflect it. None of that has happened. The louder the claim, the quieter the sourcing, which tells you everything about its strength. In the places where real documents live, court dockets, government releases, verified transcripts, there's been movement lately. But not the kind the rumor needs. The result is a vacuum where thumbnails shout exposed and the record shrugs. That mismatch is exactly how clicky myths survive. Attach an explosive word to a famous name, delay the details, and trust that most people won't ask for receipts. Meanwhile, the courts have been busy on something real, but not what the rumor mills promised. Across multiple cases, judges have rejected efforts to unseal old grand jury material tied to the broader Epstein-Maxwell history. That isn't a twisty conspiracy, it's the long-standing rule of grand jury secrecy, doing what it always does, no matter who is asking. The rulings made headlines because many expected a fireworks reveal, and the courts effectively said, not through this channel. When the official pipeline narrows, the unofficial pipeline surges, and ambiguous phrases get inflated into proof. But legal doors closing is not the same thing as secret files proving a new claim. It usually just means the law is operating exactly as designed, frustrating to some and boring to others, but consistent all the same. In other words, process, not plot, and process rarely gives rumor what rumor wants. Here's what is actually on the record. The Justice Department released lengthy interview transcripts of Maxwell's recent sessions with federal investigators, putting her words, however self-serving some may find them, into searchable PDFs anyone can read. Inside those pages, she denies the existence of the fabled client list the internet keeps waiting for, and she leans hard into her own versions of events. Agree or disagree with her credibility. The key point is simple. In that formal setting, the bombshell some corners keep promising about Meghan doesn't appear. If there were a document as explosive as a personal CV tying one celebrity to a darker narrative, you would expect a breadcrumb, a reference, a hint, something within government published material. It's not there, and saying not there isn't a defense of anyone. It's just a reading of the available record. Rumors can sprint, transcripts walk. Now zoom out and ask why Meghan's name gets pulled into this storm right now. She's been rolling out a rebranded lifestyle venture, as ever, with glossy product drops, tidy pantry staples, and a Netflix tie-in that keeps her in the weekly conversation. A relaunch breeds a counter-narrative by reflex. If the curated story is domestic calm, the viral counter-story will chase anything that looks like chaos. Tie that to newsy drops like a new marmalade and restocks, and you get a perfect collision between marketing and rumor. One side sells sunlit kitchen vibes, the other sells suspense. It's not shocking that the wildest claims spike precisely when new products land and a trailer trends. That's how attention markets work, but timing is not evidence, and branding noise is not proof. On paper, the public Meghan story this month is jars, teas, and a streaming schedule, not a secret file buried in a vault. There's also the familiar orbit that revives whenever Prince Andrew's name returns to the news. Every time government files or sealed records are mentioned, someone warns he should brace himself, and that phrase ricochets through timelines like a siren. In that echo chamber, other royal-adjacent names get folded in whether or not new facts justify it. It's an easy way to turn a legal process story into a people story, because familiarity attracts clicks. But again, we have to separate momentum from documentation. A warning headline about another person's potential problem does not authenticate a third person's alleged CV, and it definitely doesn't transform rumor into record. If anything, it shows how quickly a procedural update can morph into a cast of characters whisper chain on social media, where anyone connected by 2 degrees gets treated like a primary source. Another strand people keep reviving comes from late 2021, when lawyers in civil litigation suggested Meghan could, in theory, be a useful witness because proximity sometimes equals context. The phrasing was cautious, may have information, could be deposed. And it lived in the conditional tense, right where good lawyers park ideas they might or might not pursue. Online, that careful language was stripped for parts and rebuilt into certainty. She knew everything. That's how rumor engines work. They sand away the may and leave you with the must, because absolutes travel farther than nuance. Years later, the suggestion gets recycled as if it were a confession, even though nothing about it turned into a definitive record. It's the same trick every time. Replace context with climax, then dare the audience to spot the difference. Once you know the move, you can't unsee it, so here's the straight path through the fog. First, on-the-record rulings show that secret grand jury minutes are not being opened by the courts right now. Second, official interview transcripts exist and they don't contain a Meghan-centered revelation. Third, mainstream coverage of Meghan in 2025 focuses on As Ever and her screen projects, not on a verified tie to any mystery CV. Those points matter because they define what's documented, not what's hinted. The internet sells hints by the dozen. The record sells receipts 1 page at a time. If you're telling this story honestly, you follow the paper, not the pulse. And the paper at this moment is saying, proceed with caution, label speculation, and keep rumor in the rumor drawer until a real document moves it out. None of this means audiences are foolish for being curious. Curiosity is healthy when it's aimed at facts. It becomes a trap when a headline sells certainty the sources can't deliver. And in this case, the sources that do exist tell a quieter story. Courts saying no to unsealing, transcripts saying less than the thumbnails promise, and brand updates carrying on as you'd expect in a packed media cycle. That won't shatter the algorithm, but it is the truth-shaped version of events. It won't satisfy the loudest voices, because the loudest voices need a finale, not a process. But most real stories are process, especially where courts, prosecutors, and formal transcripts are involved. The moment there's a genuine pivot, a filing, an exhibit, a sworn reference, you'll see responsible outlets race it. Until then, restraint isn't naivety, it's discipline. There's another detail worth calling out. When a rumor leans on phrases like adult-themed without specifics, it's engineered to do 2 things at once: imply something messy and avoid a claim precise enough to be disproven. That's why it lingers. Vague language can't be fact-checked, it only multiplies. The ethical move, especially if you're speaking to a big audience, is to label the vagueness and keep it in the rumor drawer. Saying people online are saying X is not the same as showing evidence. The former is commentary, the latter is journalism. And if the line between those two gets blurry, it's usually because the traffic incentives reward the blur. The fix isn't complicated. Show the page, show the filing, show the transcript, or say you can't and tell people why. That's how you keep the conversation sharp instead of sticky. You might ask, fine. But why do reputable outlets cover any of this if there's no they're there? Because process is news. Judges refusing to unseal records is news. The government releasing interview transcripts is news. A high-profile figure dropping a new pantry item while the internet circulates allegations is, like it or not, also news. The responsible approach is to hold 2 ideas at once. Yes, there is buzz about a dramatic claim, and no, the paperwork the rumor points to is not in the public record. That split screen is uncomfortable, but it's accurate. Good coverage documents what exists, footnotes what doesn't, and never confuses a trending sentence with an evidentiary one. That's not as thrilling as a shocking reveal, but it's the only way to keep a story from sliding off the rails. And yes, silence from Meghan's side is part of the conversation. Strategists pick their battles. When a claim is squishy enough to inflate on its own, responding can accidentally legitimize it. In the attention economy, you don't answer every viral prompt. Sometimes you let time expose the gaps. That frustrates people who want instant on-camera denials, but it's also a sign that the team closest to the situation believes the rumor can't survive contact with a calendar. Non-engagement isn't an admission. Sometimes it's a calculation that the story burns out faster without oxygen. That choice doesn't prove anything about the claim itself. It just tells you how professionals handle a cloud that has thunder but no rain. If you arrive searching for the single page that ends the debate, the honest answer is that it isn't in the record. What is in the record are rulings that keep old grand jury minutes sealed, long interviews where Maxwell disputes the mythology that fuels endless posts, and current coverage of Meghan that revolves around products, programming, and ordinary celebrity scrutiny. The rest is speculation, sometimes artfully phrased, sometimes aggressively pushed, always hungry for attention. Label it that way and you'll stop it from rewriting itself as fact. If a real document emerges, it will be quoted, filed, and archived where anyone can read it. Until then, the most responsible sentence is the simplest one. We don't have it. So what do you do with a headline like disturbing evidence? Treat it like a cliffhanger, then check whether the next episode actually aired. Right now, the next episode is sealed behind grand jury rules. Archived in government PDFs that say less than the thumbnails promised, and overshadowed by predictable product news. That's not the thriller anyone teased, but it's the plot we've got. If the story changes, if a document surfaces, if a court filing introduces new, verifiable facts, you'll see it echoed by legal reporters who live and die by what's in the footnotes, not by what's in the hashtags. Until that happens, the only responsible path is to separate what's being said from what's been shown. In the end, this isn't a story about a secret CV. It's a story about how online ecosystems manufacture certainty out of suggestion, how familiar names get pulled into gravity wells they didn't create, and how quickly a suggestive phrase can outrun the paperwork. When we pin everything to the sources, we're left with something less explosive but more useful, where the courts stand, what the official transcripts actually say, and what verifiable coverage of Meghan is focused on this year. That clarity doesn't hand you a twist, it hands you a filter. Use it, and you'll spot the gap between rumor and record in seconds. Here is a simple checklist you can use anytime you see a headline like this. 1. Can anyone show the document, and does it come from an official repository, not a repost? 2. Have legal reporters covered it, and do they quote filings rather than unnamed voices? 3. Does the claim appear in formal transcripts or rulings you can actually read? If you can't tick those boxes, you're looking at speculation. That doesn't make you naive for being curious. It makes you smart for asking. And that's the filter I'm using here. Receipts over rhetoric, records over rumor, sources over screenshots every single time, without shortcuts. Right now, the share-worthy facts are simple. Courts have said the sealed material stays sealed. The government's transcripts are public and do not contain the viral reveal people describe. Coverage of Meghan is dominated by her brand, new drops, and her on-screen projects. Everything else sits in the rumor column, where it belongs until real paperwork moves it. Call that boring if you want. I call it the difference between entertainment and evidence. And in a world built to reward the loudest take, that difference is the only thing that keeps a story honest.